Hey, what's going on? I know it's been a little while since I last uploaded, but I promise I'm going to get back to a more weekly schedule. But I think I got a good one for you today. This one's a little bit different than the normal videos that I do. I'm interviewing a Twitch engineer here and kind of going through some questions that I had with some of my students in a cohort. And I thought it'd just be really interesting to hear his perspective and kind of like his understanding on how to get a job in a big tech company. What's that interview process like? What was his journey to get to that position? And even, hey, like, what did these people get paid? Like, what's the compensation look like at one of these top tech companies? So feel free to stick around to the end of the video and let me know if you have any thoughts or any questions you would like me to ask the next person I interview. If you like this style of format too, feel free to drop a comment down below and let me know if this is helpful for you. Without further ado, let's go to the interview.
All right, so for those of you who are new to this, we basically bring in a guest speaker every Friday if possible. It varies from people who have already been in the software engineering industry for some time, or for those people who have been bootcamp students and kind of graduated and gone through the program much like yourselves, whether they come from digital crafts or they come from other boot camps. Ultimately, the whole goal of this is to give you guys some experience and some exposure to other people in the industry who are a little bit further ahead than where you guys are at right now. So we open up this time to kind of hear their stories, kind of hear what their life is like essentially as an engineer, learn a little bit more about it. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to submit them in the Zoom chat. I'll try to get to them as soon as we can. If you have a question also, you can raise your hand using the reaction on the Zoom chat. I'll call on you if I see your hand, and we'll try to go by an order as much as possible. But for those of you joining in, welcome, welcome. This is my class. Thanks for coming by and hearing our guest speaker. Our guest speaker today is Adam. I'll definitely let you give yourself a little intro, Adam, but he is an engineer right now at Twitch, and he is actually friends with one of the students in my cohort. So he was gracious enough to come by and said he would do a chat with us. So Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and essentially kind of like how long you've been a software engineer?
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me and for everyone showing up. I've been programming since I was younger, but never like officially, kind of like self-taught here and there, and never really like hit the ground running with it. But I've been programming professionally since I graduated my boot camp in December of 2018. I'm pretty familiar with digital crafts, and I've known about them. I was considering them or Georgia Tech's boot camp, and I think the timing worked out with what I was trying to do, and I went the Georgia Tech route. And I've got a lot of friends that have done digital crafts, including Dustin, who's with Joe right now, and then some other people I know in the past. And it's definitely one of the more successful boot camps from what I've seen. I've previously to becoming an engineer in December of 2018, January 2019. I was a recruiter, and I did that for like 3.5 years, focusing on mostly software development candidates for like some of the clients we worked with. I worked for like an agency, so we worked with managers from all different like companies. We weren't like tied to any one company in particular, and we would just kind of try to figure out what jobs were open, and then I would go find engineers. And because I've always been interested in tech, even though I haven't been like a programmer my whole life. I've been a gamer mostly, and just being a gamer by proxy, I've kind of picked up a lot of things about programming just from people I've played with and got to know and stuff. And so it made becoming a recruiter a little bit easier than your average person getting into it. And I really like software engineering. That's definitely where I had the most success as a recruiter. And I'd help people and tell people to go to boot camps and get into JavaScript and some of the latest frameworks and stuff like that. And then I'd see them do it and get that first job after they were done. And the whole time I'm sitting here going like, that could totally be me. So I saved up some money, just straight up quit my recruiting job in May of 2018 and moved down to the city in Atlanta, did the Georgia Tech boot camp. This is before COVID, so on-site was pretty popular back then. So I did that, and it went really well. Fell in love with React and basically pursued that as like my foot in the door, trying to get into jobs afterwards. And focusing on React helped a ton. I saw that that's where the market was from when I was recruiting, and that's where not only the the more enjoyable jobs, and the people that said they enjoy their jobs more seem to live, but it also paid really well. There was a lot more to learn once you get in the door with a company that's using React, because they're clearly using latest and greatest. And then so you start learning other stuff, and then lo and behold, it's now 2023 and I haven't touched React in 2 years. So don't know how that happened, but yeah, everything's just an evolution.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for giving us a rundown of that. I didn't actually, prior to this, I didn't even know you went to boot camp. So that's even more applicable and cool to hear that you've also gone through a boot camp as well. How long was your boot camp, if you don't mind me asking?
It was like right around 3-ish months or so. It was broken up a
Okay.
little bit by the holidays because it was right around Christmas and Thanksgiving, but it was like 3.5 months, I would say.
Gotcha. So let's backtrack a little bit, because I always like to walk people through this. Like, I'm like, okay, they're engineers now. We see where they ended up now. But let's backtrack. As you were going through like your boot camp and kind of like learning the different topics that they taught at your boot camp, was there any particular areas where, one, I think you've already alluded to it, you really enjoyed, and then two, the parts where you're like, I don't think I got this?
Oh man. Yeah, I think I kind of like hacked my way through CSS. I'm not gonna lie. And like, it just really wasn't like the most fun thing that I wanted to do. Sure, I like doing my projects and like doing a good job, and I'd make it happen, but I was like, we'll see if I have to deal with this as much later on. And lo and behold, I did. But it's all good. I really fell in love, like once I get into Node and npm, and like understanding that like there's all these modules out there, and like I could just go find what I need and npm install it, and then there's docs on it, and I can start using it really quickly. And that really fascinated me, and I was kind of like off to the races at that point. Um, React React is by far my favorite like UI. I don't want to call it framework, but like just UI tool. I've tried Angular, I've tried Vue. I like both for different reasons, but like React is where my love is. So
Gotcha. That's awesome to hear. I think a lot of people are very similar in their struggles as well as what they like. It's kind of like maybe it's the same as what you went through in your boot camp, but here at our boot camp, we do the same thing, kind of like fundamentals, JavaScript, do everything kind of like vanilla, and then introduce React. And it's always like at the end, everyone's like, why didn't we just start learning React at the first place? But
I know.
you kind of get that knowledge at the very beginning. And everyone struggles, I think, for sure with CSS, because there's just so much, and you don't know like how to contain it all to do the thing you want to do unless you have a ton of practice. So actually, that would be my first question as we're jumping off of that. So you showed us what you really enjoyed and what you said you liked at your boot camp, and then you also showed us what you struggled with. So how did you kind of like decide like, hey, you know what, this is going to be a part of my thing? How am I going to get better at CSS? What was your process as you went through it so that you got better at CSS?
I think the thing I realized is it wasn't as overwhelming as my brain was telling me it was. My brain in the beginning was telling me like, there's all these different properties and you got to memorize them, and like, oh, this one, nope, that you get that one mixed up with this one, and like I just kind of shut that noise down, and I focused on learning one. What's the right way to say it? One positioning tool. So I really learned Flexbox really well, and I was like, okay, sure, there's grid. Sure, there's other ways of doing this. Like Flexbox definitely is the most popular from what I've seen in the professional world. So I'm just going to make sure I learn that. And then anything else, I can just kind of figure it out as I go. And to be honest, that like really worked out well for me. I learned Flexbox. There's a game online called Flexbox Froggy. It's really silly. I don't know if you guys know about it, but I did that like endlessly.
Totally know that one. Yep, totally know it.
Oh yeah, and then there's some blog post out there. It's like csstricks.com, and it's like the quick crash course in like Flexbox, and I literally use that for like reference if I ever like shorted out and couldn't remember what I wanted to do. But like doing that enough, and I used it in all of my projects. I made sure I didn't lean too hard on Bootstrap, and I'd pull back, and like I'd intentionally do a lot of classes to handle my Flex stuff. And I use Bootstrap for like the other stuff that's like, okay, just do this color or whatever. And like that's the stuff I tended to lean into in Bootstrap, and that worked out really well for me because I got a lot of take-home assignments when I was interviewing, and I killed the CSS on those. And when you impress someone from a CSS perspective, which I never thought was something I could do, it really like sets the stage well for you to do well in the rest of the interview.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think it's like it's those little things because if you think about it, that CSS is something that people are like intimidated about as they go through a boot camp. Like, well, like the news is like that's the same thing throughout the entire industry. It's a terrifying thing for a lot of people, especially like if you maybe only focus in backend or you focus in object-oriented languages that never touch anything CSS related. So like I kind of breaking down what your response was. I loved hearing it because it was like you identified that you it's not as crazy as it sounds. It's just a lot of things that I don't really know right now. And so you kind of like identified that. You said like I'm going to try to figure out what I need to get better at. And then you focused on specific things because I don't know about the rest of y'all. If you go on MDN right now and look up CSS, like there's more documentation on there that you could read for the entire 3-4 months of your boot camp. It's a ton of stuff, and if you try to learn it all and not see how it all comes together or works, you're gonna be really good at knowing a very little. I'll say that. But if you focus on like certain properties like positioning or like like what you were saying, like Flexbox over Grid over Bootstrap or anything like that, you really can narrow down your focus on that. So love that answer on that one.
Yeah, it's really, I think the theme that you're touching on, I just want to point out to all the students is if you diversify yourself too much, because you get excited when you get into this stuff and like, no, you've kind of been awakened to like what's out there. And if you spend too much time dabbling around, like Joe said, you never really specialize. And it's really important in the beginning to specialize. And that's what I've found helps you get your foot in the door somewhere.
No, totally agree with that advice. Thanks for mentioning that. So let's transition and then a little bit more through your journey. So like you go through your boot camp, you graduate through your boot camp. You're probably in the stage right now where you're interviewing, applying to jobs or anything like that. Can you walk us through a little bit, just like how that process was before you got your first software engineering job?
Yeah. I had a little bit of an edge because I was in the recruiting world as a recruiter. So I kind of knew like how to work with recruiters just based off like what I tended to enjoy and didn't like when I was working with candidates. So I could play that game pretty well. And if you all have any questions about that, feel free to like hit me up on LinkedIn. I can like answer a bunch of questions there. It was really challenging, like reminding myself that I'm not going to get a call back from every place I apply for. It's if I didn't understand the nuances that go into like job descriptions that you'll find in the wild as a recruiter, I would have had a hard time mentally with that. So like your average person going through a boot camp, try to not be too hard on yourself or like on the jobs you're applying for that might not show interest in you. You may think like there's a job description out there that like is you to a T. The truth is there's a lot of job descriptions that get recycled, get copy pasted around and like reused, and like people posting these jobs aren't always in the know with exactly what the manager wants. And like there's a huge gray area, a lot more of a gray area than anyone really feels comfortable with. And that's why it still is challenging to find a job. Like just because you go through a boot camp, it doesn't mean you're going to be, led indoors to some company on a red carpet. It certainly can happen. It's just important to realize that it's important to keep up the consistent application process. Playing the LinkedIn game is massive. Like if I could give anyone one recommendation, if you're going to do one thing really well when you're applying and doing the whole job hunting game, it's play the social media game on LinkedIn and network with recruiters, network with people, post stuff, connect with people so you build up a following and like have multiple people liking stuff that you'll post. And some people are just like, here's where I'm at. I worked on this today, just graduated my boot camp, blah, blah, blah. And like just little things like that help get you noticed. And a lot of people end up finding jobs through connections on LinkedIn more than you'd even realize. So that's a big part of it.
No, I love that you bring that up too. That's a great thing to kind of mention here is that, we all are like thinking we're developing all of these skills, right, that are going to be valuable. And then we go to the job listings and we see that, hey, I could apply to that, or I could match that skill and so on. But then like the overall big picture of it is that LinkedIn, just like all other social media sites, works via some kind of algorithm, right? The more you can fit and hit the things inside of that algorithm that are going to match the job descriptions that you're looking for, the more you'll get noticed by it, the more you'll get presented those options so that you can apply to them. And it doesn't just work as a consumer of LinkedIn. You can't just go on LinkedIn and consume. Like you have to kind of give back into the algorithm. And I think you touched on that a lot. So no, that's definitely great advice. So about how long did it take you to kind of go through the process of interviewing and applying before you got your first job?
Well, I had 3 offers presented to me before I finished the program. So I accepted one of those, and I wasn't happy at that first job. It ended up being like kind of not a good match for me. So it was really hard because I didn't want to leave my first job I found prematurely. But it got to a point where like, yeah, this just really wasn't working out. So I had to sit down with my manager. But I was really fortunate that I had offers going into like when I was finishing up at the boot camp. A lot of my colleagues just weren't in that same position, but that's okay. I mean, I kind of had the connections too. Like I had all my recruiting friends like bugging me, like when are you gonna be done? When are you ready? And then like, I'm coming out of Thanksgiving break and we have like a couple weeks left, and they're like, here, we're gonna apply you to these. I was like, okay, sure. And it worked out for me. And I think I had a small edge there, but that's only to say like recruiters can do a lot of work for you. You can kind of like amplify your voice and like your application process by working with recruiters and having them do a little work on your behalf. Um, but yeah, so that first job was really tough, and I didn't stay there but like 5 weeks. And I started interviewing while I was still there. That's the key. Is like if you're not happy somewhere, it's a lot harder to like leave and then tell them that you like quit for whatever reason, and then you're looking for a new job. Like that doesn't settle as well as like, hey, I got this job. I've been here for 4 weeks. I'm still working here. Like it's not a good fit. And then you tell them why. And that usually like transitions to a much better conversation. So I'm not telling everyone to like go quit your jobs if you don't like them. To just be careful how you do it. And like there's ways that you can maximize your chances to like segue into another place. So I did that, and I moved into this other job, and I was there for a good while. It was a really small company in West Atlanta, like West Midtown area. I was, and that's where I learned React like for the first time. And I was literally coding in a warehouse. There was like forklifts and stuff driving around, and there was this little company that had this React app that they paid some company to build, and then they needed some more work done to it. And so I worked there for like 6 months. It was like contract role, worked great. I got to learn React, and then I went and found a job at Auto Trader, and that was a lot of fun. That was a really good job. Cox Automotive is a great company, by the way. They hire boot campers. Um, they're very reasonable in their workload. Really good company. Just mentioning that for anyone that's in Atlanta. But
Nice.
yeah, I did
Very
that for a year, and then Twitch happened, and that's a whole story in itself.
All right. Well, I'll leave off with my questions and then start opening it up with this to everyone else. But my last question for you is: so currently, right now, I would probably say a lot of people would safely assume that working at a company as well known as like Twitch or Amazon or Google, like that, like for a lot of people, those are like the dream jobs, right? Can you probably give us a little bit of like what was your mindset going into like, hey, I have an interview or I either have a job application that I'm doing at Twitch and it's moving along. What was your mindset just as you went through it? And kind of how did you feel then compared to when you were doing it like at the very first time you were applying and stuff? What was your mindset for that one?
Yeah, this is a funny story. So it was like a Friday night. I'd been working at Auto Trader. COVID had happened, so we're all fully remote at this time. And it was a Friday night, and I was just like chilling on my computer, looking around online, and ran into some job on LinkedIn at Twitch. And I clicked it. It took me to the Twitch page, and it's like full stack developer. And they were like talking about React this, React that, and then they're like also has some back end skills. So I was like, oh my god, this is like me to a T. And so I applied to it, and I go downstairs and tell my wife, and I'm like laughing. And she's like, what are you laughing about? I was like, I just applied to a job at Twitch. Like, they're never going to call me back. They called me back to interview on like Tuesday, and I was shitting a brick. I'm not going to lie. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't really looking for a job. I just kind of did it as a meme. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll see where this goes. I kind of didn't take it seriously at first. And then so I had the initial interviews with like the recruiter, and that went well. She's like, I'll pass you to the manager. I'm like, okay, cool. Talk to the manager. He was cool. And then he's like, I'm going to set you up with a technical interview. And then I was like, okay, this is getting real. So my first technical interview was like an hour long with the UI architect, and it went pretty well. Twitch is really big on like, and you're not going to find this at every company. I'm going to point this out just because I really appreciate when people do this. They're really big on doing live coding sessions and interviews. They're applicable to the context of the business. So, for example, I was tasked with creating a live stream, like elapsed time component in React. And there were some nuances with that. Like one of the gotchas is, since we're working with like the set timeout and stuff inside of a React component, like make sure you get rid of the timeout on a dismount, things like that. I seemed to do well. And then they set me up for the final interview. The final interview was insane. It was 6 hours long with six different people. And they broke it up onto 2 days for me. So it was like 3 hours one day, 3 hours the next day. And that was really, really, really hard. There was 4 technical coding interviews. There was a 1 hour design interview, and then 1 hour with the product team where I didn't have like to code or anything. I just had to talk about stuff. And that wore me out. And they made me an offer, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, it is the dream job. Dustin knows. I tell him about my job all the time, and no one ever understands it. But I don't know if I would work for regular Amazon. I would probably only work for AWS or Twitch, but Twitch is definitely like the best of the best. You get crazy benefits. They pay really well with the West Coast companies. I don't even know how I would get an Atlanta-based job anymore because it would be such a big pay cut. I don't know if I would swallow it. So, I mean, yeah, the benefits are great. I get to go to TwitchCon every year. I get to go out to San Francisco a couple times a year, and that's always, well, that's fun as long as you stay off the streets. It's a little crazy these days. But yeah, it's a really good job. I don't get overloaded with work. I work like maybe 32 hours a week. Most of my meetings are between 1 and 5. I can go do anything and not even have to tell my manager. They just like trust you really well, and everyone respects the job too. So
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I'm sure a lot of you out there are listening, and kind of, you think of like these well-known companies and these well-known like jobs, and you know the pay is high, the benefits are there, and all the things that come with the job, and you might think like, oh, does that mean I work 70 hours a week? Because we're conditioned to kind of think about that when we see doctors or lawyers or other positions that work a ton of hours and make a ton of money. And it's just different in software engineering. It hits differently in this job, and I think that's one of the coolest parts about it. So that's enough questions from me. I'm going to go open it up now to the students because I want to be respectful about our time here. If you have a question you would like to go ahead and ask them, feel free to drop it in the chat. Otherwise, if you have a question, you can raise your hand up there and I will call on you, and we'll go ahead and ask your question. So if you have any questions right now, go right ahead and ask. I see one. Do you know if Twitch's interview process? Right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to answer what Stacy and some other people said. So Stacy, that interview process is Twitch's interview process. It's also the same at Amazon. They try to standardize it across the whole org. I don't know if Amazon will like select, like the person that's interviewing has the opportunity to select whatever they want to ask the candidate. So they may not be as friendly as we try to be with our interviews, but yeah, we like to ask like not crazy like algorithm stuff. Like if I went and interviewed at Google, they'd probably ask like some silly algorithm problem. If you don't know the algorithm, you're on a sinking ship already, and that's just not fair. So we try to stay away from stuff like that. And then I did say Cox Automotive. They have a presence in Atlanta. They have some presence in the Northeast and on the West Coast, I think, too. They own a lot of brands, from like Auto Trader to Kelley Blue Book to a bunch of other stuff. Let's see.
I think that was the questions we had in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask? And I can call on you if you have. Okay, Jay, you had your question. Go ahead and ask.
So as a former recruiter, kind of having seen both sides, I hear a lot that most people that go through a boot camp, their resumes, their projects, everything looks exactly the same. So, everybody's done a weather app, everybody's done blackjack, all that kind of stuff. So do you have any tips for us to help us stand out? More projects that we can do, or projects that we should get involved with, technologies that we should learn, anything?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. I know what you mean about resumes tending to kind of blend together and look the same. Um, so I've got some information on my website about this, and I've also got my resume on there. Let me quick mention this so that you all can check out this and maybe get some things that I might not be thinking of. But downtownadambrown.com. There's it's just a website I made dedicated to helping people get their first job in tech. And I do talk about boot camps on there, and I do talk about like the resume stuff that I do, and I show the example of my resume. One thing I did though in the very beginning that I really only did for my first job interviewing, and this was more, I started doing this more to like empower the recruiters that I was working with, to give them the information that they needed so that when they get off the phone with me and they turn around and they start talking to people in the office about the different jobs that they might think I'm a fit for, they had the right information available to like talk to the account managers in their company. And also if they get the chance on the phone with a manager and here's the candidates I've talked to lately, there's this guy, Adam, and they just read off this little thing I sent them. So this thing I would send out it was just a synopsis of what I'd learned in the boot camp. Like the resume of someone coming out of a boot camp, like you said, looks pretty similar. Sure, you got your projects on there, bunch of the same technologies, but like some people miss some of the details that they've also learned. And I'm trying to, let me think. I would get down to like the nitty gritty on like CSS3 with Flexbox. Like I have really mastered Flexbox, JavaScript, ES6 JavaScript, and promises, closures. Like I would get that detailed on like some of the things that people really that are hiring someone that's junior. These are like the big check boxes that they look for. They usually don't get those on the resume side. They usually have to wait until they get someone on the phone and interviewing them to find out if they know closures or not. But I tried to broadcast the little things like that a little bit more, and it seemed to get people's attention pretty well. So I've been telling people to do the same thing for a while, and from what I understand, it's helped out some people. I think I talk about this on my website too. I would be more than happy to dig up the document. It's on my computer at home, and I'm not there because I don't have power right now. But if you want to send me a message on LinkedIn, I'm happy to pull up the document that I'm talking about that I kind of shot around with my resume to the recruiters. I think I even attached this or like worked it into a cover letter when I would apply, and that it gave enough people like the warm and fuzzies. I got a really good like interview request ratio. So that's probably one good thing. The other thing I would mention is when you all graduate, I think it's really important to be able to talk about something that you've been working on since you've graduated. And it's a really good green flag to give interviewers that like, hey, I am dedicated to this. I graduated. That's not the end of the road for me. Because a lot of people, they go through boot camps and then like they kind of do nothing and they just apply. And it's not bad. Like you can still get a job that way. But I think there's a lot of value in being able to say, yeah, so I graduated. I'm spending a lot of time applying. I'm also working on this project since I graduated. It's a new project I've made. So like you have a lot of opportunity with like doing whatever you want in a new project rather than like being in a class and them telling you exactly what you need to do it with. So that's kind of nice. It kind of shows you're like a step ahead of, the average person. That's a really good thing. As far as technologies to learn, I think you all are getting into, are you doing TypeScript in this?
It's not officially part of the curriculum. It is something we've introduced and we'll slowly start introducing eventually, but not officially part of it just yet.
Yeah, so learning something like some kind of major technology after you leave is another big selling point for yourself. So TypeScript's probably a very good thing to get into on your own after you finish the boot camp. Like you're at a really good spot in terms of your capabilities to like jump into that without much trouble. The other thing I've seen people jump into is testing. I remember we talked about unit testing a little bit at at my program that I was in, but it never was like given any amount of like respect that I think it should have. So whatever job you all get, I guarantee you, you're going to have to be writing unit tests for all the stuff that you build. And it's way better to know a little bit about that than having to tell someone that, hey, I've never done unit tests on my own. Can you walk me through this? Like, it's gonna be worth your time is all I'm trying to say. So either testing or TypeScript are probably two really good things to spend some time on.
Those are awesome advice, and I would completely agree with that. 100%. TypeScript and testing after the boot camp would be ideal. Anyone else? Any other questions? Max, I see your hands raised.
Hi, thanks for answering our questions. So earlier you mentioned that there are like certain nuances in job applications that you were aware of because you were a recruiter. Can you talk about like some of those like nuances and some of the things that maybe we should look for when we're applying to jobs?
Yeah. So people will do you'll see everything, but you see a lot of in a job description, it looks like a UI role, for example, and then you go down to where the bullet points are, and you'll see experience with Angular, comma, React, comma, Vue, comma, etc. Or sometimes there's like 6 there, and you're staring at that, and you're going like, what the hell's going on? Like, what do they actually want? And there's some ways to read through that and make safe assumptions, I'll say. Typically, if they're like listing a bunch of frameworks, the first one they're going to list is the one that they probably use. That's the first one. They'll probably list everything under the sun because people don't know how to write the best job descriptions. They don't realize that it's okay to just write experience with React or similar framework. Like that's okay too. But sometimes people can get thrown off and feel like a job isn't meant for them if they see something on the job description that they don't know. So that leads into the next point is things that are on a job description that you may not know. I approach those as opportunities. And if I ever have a second to talk to anyone that's hiring for the role or send a cover letter, an email, whatever it is, talk to a recruiter, whatever, I like to at least know half the stuff on a job description and feel like the other half is stuff that I could grow into over time. Granted, if they're putting stuff on there that they're not actually using, it's important to kind of like realize when they're doing that. But some people, I watch them like read down 5 bullet points of a job description. They have the first 2, they don't have the last 3. They feel like they shouldn't apply. And I tell those people like, you really should apply, and you should use that as your advantage because no one wants to hire the perfect fit for a role. They may say that they do. I need to find the perfect person for this role. They need to find the person with the stuff that they actually need them to hit the ground running. There's a lot of stuff that they can still learn, and that stuff is also going to be on the job description. So just take it with a grain of salt. It's okay to apply to dream jobs like that Twitch job that I applied to. Really, the only stuff I saw in there that resonated with me was the React stuff. Like everything else, working with backend microservices on AWS. I'd never worked on AWS. Backend microservices, I'd never done backend microservices. But like these are all things that I've learned since I've gotten there. So I think the sweet spot is like somewhere in the middle, rather than like being hard on yourself because you're not getting callbacks because like you think there's some perfect candidate out there that's applying to the job. That's just not the case usually. There's other things you can do. It takes a little bit of effort, but like you can do minor tweaks on your resume to move things up that might be speaking more to a certain job that you're applying to try to like, eyes go down a page only so fast, and they're going to miss half the stuff on that page. So usually like bumping things to the top is going to help you. I would reorder some stuff. Like when I applied from AutoTrader to Twitch, I still, even though I wasn't looking for a job, it took a minute and kind of like rejuggled my resume just a little bit. I think these things all kind of add up. And then if I'm working with a recruiter, it's a lot easier for me to get feedback. But if I'm just applying to like a black hole to a job posting online, just realize like chances are you're not going to hear back an answer if they don't want to move forward with you. And that's just how the game works. And it really sucks because like everyone wants, constructive feedback on what they can do better. And usually there are things we can be doing better. If things don't go well for you for an extended period of time, that's when I would start looking into your resume and trying to figure out how you can make some changes there. I'm pretty good with resumes. I'm happy to like, I'm gonna get overwhelmed by this and I'll do the best I can. But if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll do my best to offer my best opinion on your resume and offer any ideas that might work. I still think like boot camp graduates doing the project listing is the way to go. And unless it's tech related, I tend to tell people to keep off your previous experience because it just doesn't matter and it's going to detract from the valuable stuff on there. So it's one, you know, one part like a mental game. The second part is like seeing through some of the ambiguity in job descriptions and the whole process. And then I guess the third part is once someone contacts you back, knowing exactly how to play that communication and that relationship to the max so that you can just maximize your chances of like being received as like a respectful person who's got their stuff together, and then that person will feel more inclined to like present you to someone in the company that's going to interview you. And like there's little things you can do, and sometimes it's specific to the situation, but just like being aware of like delicately like making the right decision through all of these processes so you can maximize your chances in interviews, and then next thing you know, you got a job offer. So
Great question, Max. Thanks for asking that. I see one again from Stacy popped up in the chat, and we'll probably have time for one more. What if you already have a dev experience or have dev experience? Do you think having a current project listed is still helpful?
I do, yeah. So if I have a current project listed, that's probably going to mean that I'm like doing something with some relevant like latest cutting edge tools, and like it gives you something to talk about. It's a lot harder if you've like had dev experience, you take a break, and then you do a boot camp and you come back. You almost like want to stay out of the game of trying to recant a story that's like too far in the past. It's a lot more effective to stay present. And so the project gives you that opportunity to do that. Plus you get to make a lot of decisions in your project that are not decisions you'd necessarily make at a previous job about what you want to use, and how you want to do things. And that opens a lot of good conversation as well. So I think there's a lot of value in both. Let me see what else. What if you could work as a graphic designer? Could you list that or leave it off? I think that's like fairly relevant, and I think the way is like putting that on your resume in a way that works well with your dev experience. So you may not like put everything on there you had on old resumes in regards to that job, but you may want to use like something that talks about how you have an eye for design and like how you're really like fixated on getting things right. And I use the words pixel perfect, things like that. Think about how you can tie that in with the rest of your resume, and I would say use it if that makes sense. Let's see. How do you discuss previous dev work with projects you may not be able to discuss due to the company not releasing those products yet? If it's in an interview, I think it's fair game to like talk about it. Like you're in a private conversation with someone and maybe just offering a disclaimer up front, like this is going to be released here in the next few months, but I can talk to you about what I've worked on. And yeah, I think it's still fair game and good conversation for you.
Dustin, I know you had your hand up there for a second.
Yeah. Surprised nobody asked. If you're comfortable, Adam, from when you started recruiting to now, can you give us like an estimate, like a ballpark estimate of how your salary increased?
Yeah. So in 2014 was my first, excuse me, my first full year as a recruiter. I made like 65K, and then my next 2-3 years I made like just into six figures, like 120 or so. Then when I started over as an engineer, my first job was $40 an hour contract. And then when I got to Auto Trader, I was getting paid as a salaried employee, and that was like, I think 90, I was at 90K. And I was like a year and a half of experience at that point in professionally in coding. And then when I got the Twitch offer, my salary went from 90K to 176K. And then now it's right around 350. So, yeah. Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
is that a combination like a lot of the big thing companies have? Is it typically like base, stock, bonus kind of thing?
Yeah, it's like a math equation to like really understand how it works. But basically, the easiest way to say it is like half my pay is salary, and that's what I see every 2 weeks in the form of like direct deposit. And then twice a year, which is like mid-May and mid-November, is when my stock shares vest. And you have to be there for like 2 years until you start getting stock handed to you. But once you've been there for like 3 and 4 years, you start getting like way bigger chunks. And so now I'll get like, I think my salary is like 180 something, and then they give me an extra like 170 in stock. So, and that's assuming, okay, well, so the 170K, that is assuming what it was valued to me when they say gave me that stock. Like it happens every April. So if the stock goes up, it works out really well, which the stock has gone up like 20%. So I'm kind of like, I play dumb to the stock thing and pretend, me and my wife like pretend like it doesn't exist. And then we just live off the base salary. Our thinking is that Amazon's going to keep going. So
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty good advice. So they're essentially granting you like X amount of stock shares valued at this price on this day. If stock says goes up, it's that. I got
yeah,
you.
they commit to the share number rather than the dollar number. So that works out well because the shares can change.
Gotcha. Okay, and our last question right here: what framework do you work with now?
Oh man. All right, so I've been working in a programming language called Go for like a year and a half now, and I do a lot of TypeScript still. I work in something called AWS CDK. So CDK it's a framework, I guess you could say. The whole point of it is it creates resources on AWS in code. So you can sure you can actually like have your actual program that you've written, but like how are you gonna put that in the cloud? Well, you got a lot of options on AWS, and so you can write a bunch of TypeScript inside of CDK, and it'll deploy it out to AWS for you in a certain way that you define it to. So we've got all of our Go code is managed by like CDK based infrastructure. So it's all TypeScript on the infrastructure side, and then Go on the actual service side. Very, very heavy in AWS stuff too. So like AWS Lambda, Kinesis. I didn't know of any of these until I started working here, but S3, Firehose, like all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's crazy. It still doesn't feel real anymore. Like still, I've been here for almost 3 years, and like I'm still having a hard time realizing that I work at Twitch because I was such a fanboy of this place for like ever. I was a video game nerd, so.
No, that's awesome. Thanks for that question, and thanks for taking the time to answer those. So, hey, Adam, right before we leave, really quick, are you cool if I drop your LinkedIn to the students so that way they could possibly connect with you and reach out if they have any questions? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And any words of advice you want to give them as you head on out?
I'll answer that question real fast. The video game was I've been playing this like rogue like game. I don't even know what its name is. I got it for like $5 on sale the other day. So I'm playing some random roguelike game.
Those are always fun.
Dude, I love them. I just can't get into anything else these days. I don't know what's wrong with me. My best advice is learn how to work with recruiters and get them to do work for you, and keep up with your work when you get out of here. If you stop coding for a week, you're going to forget it. It's going to be a lot harder to get back into it. So code every day, even if it's just a little bit. Keep it fresh, and just keep applying, and you will get that job. There's too many jobs out there that need people like y'all. Trust me. There's way too many openings. Yeah.
Well, hey, Adam, thanks a lot. You given such good advice. I wish we could just like kind of write it all down and give it out to everyone. But appreciate you taking the time coming by and speaking to these students, man. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll drop your LinkedIn for them in their personal Slacks. But until next time, thanks for coming by.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Hope y'all have a good
Have a
one.
good one. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.